Before we start, I want to make something very clear. This video does not take a political stance, nor does it try to attack or defend anyone. Everything you're about to hear comes from documented research, historians' debates, and primary sources from the time. And if you'd like to check any of them yourself, the full list of sources is available in the description. Now, let's begin. Most of us grew up hearing a familiar story about Christopher Columbus, the brave explorer who set sail in 1492 and discovered America. It's a simple, heroic version that many Americans learned in school. But behind that schoolbook image lies a much more complicated reality. When Columbus reached the Caribbean, he didn't arrive in an empty world. Across the islands and continents, there were thriving societies, languages, traditions, and millions of indigenous people who had lived on those lands for thousands of years. And for many of them, his arrival marked the beginning of a devastating era. Columbus's own letters, along with accounts from members of his crew, describe the early encounters. Very quickly, admiration turned into exploitation. Enslavement began. Forced labor systems were introduced, and harsh punishments were used to control indigenous communities. Women and children were not spared. These descriptions aren't modern reinterpretations. They're written by the people who were actually there. Then came the diseases: smallpox, measles, influenza, spreading faster than ships and wiping out communities that had never been exposed to them before. Entire villages were lost in a matter of months. Historians today describe it as one of the largest population collapses in human history. And this was only the beginning of the long-term consequences. The arrival of Columbus opened the floodgates for wave after wave of European colonization. Lands were seized, cultures were suppressed, and systems of forced labor expanded across the Americas. But the story doesn't end with indigenous people quietly disappearing. Many tribes resisted fiercely, courageously, and for centuries. From the Caribbean to North America, indigenous nations pushed back against colonization. Some resisted through diplomacy, others through alliances, and many through armed conflict. Tribes fought to defend their land, their families, and their way of life. These struggles would eventually lead to a long line of conflicts between native peoples and European powers, battles that shaped the history of the continent. And even though some of these events happened long after Columbus himself, indigenous leaders often saw the root of their suffering beginning with his arrival. But to be fair to the viewer, the full story of those conflicts, the details of the tribes involved, and how each region responded, is complex enough to need its own full video. This video is only touching the surface of that part of history, giving a glimpse of what followed. If you're interested in hearing the full story of indigenous resistance, from the Caribbean uprisings to the later wars fought by tribes across the continent, that will be an entire episode on its own. Today, the legacy of Columbus remains controversial. Some argue that he was simply a man of his time, driven by exploration and ambition. Others point out that acknowledging harm doesn't erase history, it clarifies it. And that's the aim of this video. Not to instruct you how to feel, but to present documented realities so you can decide for yourself. History isn't made of heroes and villains. It's made of people, choices, consequences, and perspectives that often get left out of textbooks. By understanding the full picture, we honor not just one version of the story, but all of those who lived through it. If you appreciate thoughtful, source-based storytelling like this, make sure to subscribe. There's so much more we're going to explore, including the full, detailed video about indigenous resistance that this story deserves.